Our friends, a good morning once again. Is it a good one? I called morning on my end, someone on your end. A good morning once again. You're most welcome to our 10th Economic, Social and Cultural Rights Conference, National Conference. It is a pleasure to have you. Our friends who are joining in online, thank you for making time. Thank you for finding that data. We pray that it sustains you throughout the day. Without much ado, allow me to say, it's that hour, the much awaited hour when we should kick off. Could we kindly rise up for the anthems and then we get underway? We live in a digital era, so we shall have the digital anthems.
Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tutimize na malengo yetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuajibike, tuimarike, umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu,
Thank you. You may resume your seats. It's interesting. We come to talk education, and I saw some of us mumble the East African anthem. I will advise that at the end of the conference, we re-enroll into the primary school such that we pick those anthems and then we shall return. Athan Soroko is my name, and I have the awesome privilege of hosting you for today as we come commemorate 10 years of the National Conference on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Jetuvudde oba jenvudde waffe. This is a conference that began in 2014. I don't know how many of us were here at the inaugural conference, 2014. By show of hands, 2014, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We only have 4 surviving. Okay, where are the others? And at that time, the big question was, are actually economic, social, cultural rights justiciable? You can imagine 10 years ago, we are still struggling with that question. And then the second national conference happened in 2015. How many of us are on Twitter? And how many of us are on Twitter? By show of hands? Participants, show on hands. Yes, you're on Twitter. Oh, sorry, X. How many of us are on X? Damn. Yes. And for the first time, we had, now should I say Twitter handle or X handle of hashtag ESCR Uganda 2015, and that was in 2015. And the subject then was tackling social inclusion in access to social, economic goods and services for sustainable development. That was 2015. We returned in 2016, and hashtag ESCR Uganda 16, we were discussing business and human rights. We returned in 2017, we discussed social goods and social inclusion. Fast forward 2020, COVID-19. Yeah, we had a version of the conference in 2020 of COVID-19. It was about election promises, political accountability, and service delivery. And then on the 8th conference, we returned here to reclaim public services for inclusive and sustainable social economic recovery post-COVID-19. And then we returned last year to talk about financing a just and inclusive recovery. And here we are. Today we come to talk about the human capital development, the cost of education in the National Development Plan 3. Could you clap for yourselves for being here? Great. And I want to, first of all, recognize and appreciate the conveners who have faithfully kept fort for the last 10 years. Makerere University. Let's appreciate Makerere University. Then Makerere School of Law, Makerere University. We appreciate the School of Law. We have the Public Interest Law Clinic, Initiative for Social and Economic Rights, the Uganda Consortium for Corporate Accountability, the Network of Public Interest Lawyers, to which I am the team leader. That one I must mention, lest you leave without knowing who was here. And of course, we've had a number of other entities that have come along with us over the years, and we must congratulate them. A quick walk back to the day you made 10 years. You remember the day you made 10 years? 10 years. What happened when you turned 10 years? I will remember 10 years found me going to P4, primary 4. And because we're here to talk about education, I'll talk about my primary school experience. We had been warned that if you thought you have been doing mathematics, you're now starting mathematics. Between baby class and P3, we were doing numbers. I'm not that young. And then it was in P4 that we began night preps. I was in a boarding school for the first time. We were looking forward to that opportunity of night preps. P4, 1988. You can now tell how old I was. Glad to say that my school still exists. Though it is no longer a private school, it is now a universal primary education school. Ask your neighbor, does your primary school still exist? Ask them. And definitely at 10 years, we are meant to celebrate those 10 years. Organizers, do we have cake at the end of the day to celebrate the 10 years? If we don't, go and find cake. We cannot celebrate 10 years without cake. And the participants did what? Clapped. So clap. But truth be told, as participants, we've been on a receiving end, okay? And probably it is high time we also gave back to the organizers. So the organizers have provided a mobile money number on which you can deposit. A thank you to them. The number is 0782. Kindly take the number. We need to appreciate the conveners. After 10 years, surely they should be receiving from at 0782 725 Amanyireta Gani. My name's Nsereko Arthur. Well, friends, we are at a place where we are discussing COVID-19. Definitely, globally, COVID-19 has affected our access to economic, social, and cultural rights, but most especially in Uganda. And one of the things all sectors did suffer, courtesy of COVID-19, is our education sector. You will recall, for 2 years, our schools are closed, and then the children are growing on us. You will recall that is the time we have a spike in teenage pregnancies. Some of the students or learners made their way back to school. Others to date have not made their way back to school. The Ministry of Education is telling us over 15 million learners are affected by COVID-19, majority of them in primary school. The National Planning Authority is estimating almost 30% of learners not making it back to school. We must underscore the rising poverty levels courtesy of COVID-19. We are alive to the cost of education in the era in which we are. The rise in inequality, COVID-19 sends us to remote learning. Most of us who are in the room, I think, are affluent, so we could afford the data, we could afford the gadgets. But then a number of learners in public schools, especially the universal primary, universal secondary, cannot keep pace with the remote learning. And so it is for that reason that we come here and we're asking ourselves, where are we as a country in as far as human development is concerned in the context of our National Development Plan 3? How has the state performed on its duties? What is the financing like? My duty is to ensure the proceedings for today run. But because we are talking education, it's only proper that we do some roll call. When was the last time roll call was done on you? By show of hands, how many of us are coming from the early childhood development sector? Early childhood, nursery school, you're a promoter of nursery school education, you're a teacher, nursery school education. We don't have any here. Okay, how many of us are learners? You're a student. You're a student. Student, hands up. I'm also a student. Professor Mbazira will tell you I failed to graduate. Good. Primary school education promoters, your primary school teacher, primary school, ably represented. Very good. Secondary school education promoters, secondary school. Don't you have children in secondary school, parents? You're also promoters. Put your hands up. Safin, I didn't see your hand go up at primary school, and yet I know you have 7 of them in primary school. University education, tertiary institution, tertiary institutions, hands up. Good, good. Regulators, Ministry of Education, DEOs, inspectors of schools, your regulator of education. Hands up. Oh, great. Friends online, you have an opportunity to respond to these through the chat, and we shall definitely pick your feedback. So, we are all stakeholders, and we hope that at the end of today, we will have left with a clear position on where we stand. Without much ado, allow me to invite the conveners to come and officially welcome you. Let's welcome Professor Christopher Mbazira, the coordinator of the Public Interest Law Clinic, on behalf of the convener. Prof.
Thank you so much, Arthur. Good morning, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. I won't go down the slippery lane of mentioning all the protocols, lest I forget somebody or very important protocol. Otherwise, it is a pleasure to have you here today. As indicated by Arthur, it is 10 years since we last inaugurated this conference. It started in 2014, as Arthur has indicated. It has been a very long journey, but very fruitful, as I will show. We are celebrating this conference today under the theme, Human Capital Development, the Cost of Education in the Era of the National Development Plan 3. This year is special. It's not easy to consistently have an activity of this nature for a period of 10 years. Actually, previously, the conference has been bigger than it is in terms of physical tendency. For the last 9 years, we always used Makerere University Main Hall. It's only, I think, last year and the other year that we used the new auditorium down there, but which is equally big. We've always had hundreds of people attend the conference. It has been a very fruitful conference in terms of having people come together, in terms of influencing policy and so many other things. We would like to thank the various partners that we've worked with, including the conveners. We've had certain conveners that have worked with us consistently, including the Uganda Human Rights Commission, the Equal Opportunities Commission, FIDA Uganda at a certain stage, though not as consistent as the others. And of course, the major conveners, including the Public Interest Law Clinic and the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. We also pay special tribute to our partners that have provided us with resources, quite a number. I cannot mention all of them here. Some outstanding ones include, at some point when we were starting, the UN Office for the High Commissioner for Human Rights. It's unfortunate that they had to pack their bags last year and exit the country. under very unfortunate circumstances, but we thank them because they supported us when we were starting. At some point, we got support from GIZ, that is the German Development Agency. It supported us when we did the conference focusing on local government and service delivery. We've also been able to, we're also able to get support from the Democratic Governance Facility, DGF. Again, DGF also had to pack its bags last year, and it exited the country, again, under very unfortunate circumstances. I don't know who is packing their bags next, because it appears that it's an era of people working for social justice, people working for democracy, and people working for enhancement of human rights to pack bags and go somewhere. I don't know where they are sent to. Otherwise, in absentia, we are grateful to those agencies that have supported us. We've also gotten support from Wellsprings Philanthropic Fund, which has also supported us consistently, and so many other partners that I may not mention because I'm time constrained. As mentioned by Arthur, the purpose of the first conference we had in 2014 was to push for the justiciability of economic, social, and cultural rights. What we mean by justiciability is a recognition that those elements or those norms that constitute these rights are enforceable in a court of law, meaning that an individual whose rights have been violated can actually approach a court of law and have these rights enforced, meaning that an individual who feels that they are deprived have a right to claim those rights. That's what we were pushing for in 2014. This came at a time where globally we had a hangover. So many countries were still resistant, indicating that economic, social, and cultural rights are not justiciable. So we were trying to push that agenda in Uganda. And it came at a time where there was a constitutional review on the horizon. If you remember 2014, conversations around reviewing the 1995 Constitution were starting, and we thought we could take advantage of that to have these rights concretized in the Constitution. But of course, we know that the review took another direction and concentrated only on a few areas, including removing the age limit. I won't go there for now. That will be a conversation for another day. Over the years, the conference has been convened under different themes, carefully selected, depending on the needs of the time. The themes which have been addressed over the years include the following. Arthur has mentioned some of them. In 2014, as indicated, we addressed the theme of the nature of economic, social, and cultural rights. In 2015, we addressed the issue of the theme of tackling social exclusion. In 2016, we focused on the subject of business and human rights. In 2017, we looked at local government and service delivery. 2018, we looked at this as sustainable development goals, that's the SDGs. 2019, we looked at access to justice to reclaim economic, social, and cultural rights. 2020, as we were nearing the 2021 elections, we looked at the subject of election promises and political accountability, because when one followed the agenda then, for many political actors, they were promising services. They were promising to improve the welfare of the electorate. So we focused on that to determine whether it is the election promises made previously in 2016. Actually, it was an audit of some sort, whether the election promises made in 2016 were fulfilled. 2021, we looked at the subject of reclaiming service, public service delivery for inclusion, post-COVID-19 recovery. 2020, we're recovering from COVID, so we're looking at how do we ensure that our services are provided. And then 2022 was still reeling under the effects of COVID, so we looked at the subject of financing a just and inclusive post-COVID recovery process. The country then was starting a process which was described as recovery. Over the years, we've achieved quite a lot. I may not mention everything that we've achieved. Of course, one of the major things is having all of you here, those that have attended consistently, but even those that attending for the first time. That's not a mean achievement. We've had people come from different parts of the country over the years. We've made friends. We've built partnerships out of this. We've come up with new projects out of this because of the opportunity provided by the platform. And the conference, in my view, I may be corrected on this, I consider this conference to have been the biggest human rights conference in the country for the last 10 years. In terms of attendance, in terms of impact, in terms of relevance, and so many other things. We've held it consistently. We've influenced policy reforms through this conference, actually. I can just mention two very important examples. Because of the conference we had focusing on business and human rights, one of the outcomes out of that conference was a move by the Ministry of Gender to adopt what is described as the social impact assessment. We now have that framework in place to ensure that in addition to environmental impact assessments in businesses or any forms of enterprises, as is done for purposes of ensuring environmental compliance, we should also have a component of social assessment or social evaluation of some sort. And there is a lot that touches on economic and social welfare in that. The other outcome has been the action plan on business and human rights adopted the last year, again arising from conversation we've had in the conference. The other that has played, I could call it a catalyst role, has been the fact that the National Planning Authority has fully embraced the human rights-based approach to development. Because at some point we engaged on that in one of our conferences, and outside that we continue to engage the National Planning Authority. The other very big achievement that we've seen coming from the conference is the fact that we've publicized recommendations of treaty bodies as well as recommendations from the Universal Periodic Review process. For colleagues who may not be familiar with this, the treaty body system is a treaty body system constructed by the United Nations. Periodically, countries including Uganda that are members of the UN report to those bodies on the actions they have taken to implement the human rights treaties, and usually the bodies come up with recommendations that have to be implemented. In some of the conferences, we've drawn on those recommendations. Actually, in the 2014 conference, we drew a lot on the recommendations from the UN Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. This conference has inspired the litigation to enforce economic, social, and cultural rights. I know Arthur, who heads the network of public interest lawyers, can share with us at some point some of the cases which have arisen from conversations we've had at this conference. One of the most outstanding cases was a case that was done. Arthur, when did we get judgment in the eviction guidelines case? 2019, we got a very good decision from the courts compelling government to put in place eviction guidelines, so that guidelines are done in a systematic manner that is also done in a way that it respects people's human rights. That was a very big achievement, but partly catalyzed by the conversations we've had at this conference. Another achievement, and I will stop at that in terms of achievements, is the fact that when we started in 2014, very few CSOs were speaking about economic, social, and cultural rights. Very few CSOs had these rights on the agenda of the projects and research that they undertake. But right now, there are so many CSOs that are focusing exclusively on these rights, including the areas of water, education, healthcare, social security, housing, and so many other areas, including food. That's something that we need to celebrate. Actually, around that time, I was one of the few experts on the subject of economic, social, and cultural rights. I almost gained celebrity status at the time. I was so celebrated that actually my alma mater, the University of Pretoria, gave me a special award. My position has since been taken by so many young, more vibrant people that are probably doing things much better than I do. But to me, that's an achievement that we now have so many experts on the subject. The question, though, and I'm going to conclude, is what should we focus on in the next 10 years? And we may, at some stage, want to hear from you. Should we continue focusing on economic, social, and cultural rights? Should we continue doing things the same way? As you can see, this conference has been changed a bit. We are not using a big venue with so many people. The majority of our participants are online. So as technology changes, the way we do things too has to change. But how about in terms of the thematic focus? The question I put on the table, should we continue to generally focus on economic, social, and cultural rights? Or are we now happy that everybody knows what these rights are, that the state understands it has an obligation to implement these rights and ensure that people's economic and social welfare is addressed? That's a question I put on the table. What is clear, though, to me, and which somehow speaks to the theme for this conference, and which I think is something that we need to take forward seriously, is the fact that when you see the countries that have been able to break through economically, there is no country which can break through without a good quality human resource. That's a very important aspect, because so many countries now are developing on the basis of services. So the service industry is key. And you cannot satisfy the service industry if you don't have not only adequate in terms of numbers, but also a very good quality of human resource. So as we move forward, we need to begin to question, what is the quality of our human resource? My boss, the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Finance and Administration, is here. Universities are a key player in this. What kind of human resource are we putting out there? Is it in sync with the needs of the society? Is it properly trained? Is it in position to deliver? Are we skilling our labor enough? In addition to that, what's the legal environment within which the labor operates? Is it protective enough? Are employment rights respected? Do we have mechanisms in place to address grievances? How about social security? Is our social security sector delivering the way it should? Those are some of the questions we should address. The key question to me, which is immediate and which we may want to address, if we can't address it this year, probably next year, how do we address what I describe as the tragedy of losing our skilled labor? Initially, so many of us were not bothered. We were losing unskilled labor to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates. Those of you who travel, you remember 2-3 years ago, every time you went to the airport, you would see queues and queues of young, energetic people, our youth, people in their prime, going to provide services outside the country. And of course, when you looked at the wages, it's exploitation. So we are losing that. And the middle class, we were not bothered. But now there is a change. We are now losing our skilled and semi-skilled labor to Canada, among others. I'm sure if we were to be open here, there are some people in this room that are processing papers to go to Canada. Please confess and put up your hand. Probably I may convince you to change your mind. So, if we started by losing our unskilled manpower of people in their prime between the ages of 20 and 35, what does the future hold if we are now losing our skilled manpower in the same age bracket? I was in Ghana this week. The same tragedy is unfolding there. And a medical specialist, I had a medical specialist advising a colleague that please don't come to our hospital because we've lost all the nurses. We are not able to take care of you. And they were explaining why there was a sudden death in that hospital. So National Planning Authority, Mr. Kasule, take back the message. How do we address this? The visit is coming. Very soon you're also going to lose professors to Canada. I'm also processing my papers. Let me confess now. But anyway, on a more serious note, how do we address that issue? The other issue that we may want to think about as we start the next 10 years, we see a new dawn of decline in civil and political rights. And this is a global phenomenon, which of course we see so many manifestations in Uganda and other parts of Africa. You see, we are going back to the era of coup d'etats. I don't know if we are at liberty to have a conference that focuses on coup d'etats. But we are going back to the era. We thought, those of us that are in the field of governance, democratization, we thought that Africa has put coup d'etats behind. But we are now going back to an era of coup d'etats. And the attachment here between those coup d'etats and the reality on the ground is a rapid decline in civil and political rights. How do we address this? And it has implications. I said I was in Ghana 2-3 days ago. Ghana now has a problem. They don't have onions. Yet they use onions a lot in their food. But why? Because they get their onions from Niger. And in Niger, there is a coup. Then there are sanctions that ECOWAS has put on Niger. So you see that connection. And of course, one could say, but onions, I can do without onions. But how many people depend on onions as a source of income? That chain, that business chain. Ghana is also, at a certain point, they are now trying to address it. They had a scarcity of tomatoes. Why? Because they get their tomatoes from Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso also had the coup. So you see, that chain, I don't know what we would lose here. We enjoy Rolex a lot, but we don't grow the wheat. So